In 2020, there was an incident that took place at my granddaughter's school.
For years, Joni Lamb kept a secret hidden from the world, something about Marcus Lamb's death that no one was supposed to know. Rumors, whispers, and unanswered questions have surrounded their family ever since that tragic day. Now, shocking new details are coming to light, revealing a side of the story that could change everything you thought you knew. What really happened? And why did Joni try so hard to keep it from the public? Prepare to uncover the truth. Marcus Lamb's death in November 21 hit the Christian community like a thunderclap. He wasn't just a television personality, he was a symbol of faith, hope, and resilience for millions of viewers. People turned to him during difficult times, trusting his words, his guidance, and the unwavering strength he seemed to carry in every broadcast. When news spread that he had passed away due to COVID-19 complications, the initial reaction was pure shock. It felt sudden, almost unreal, like a foundational pillar had been removed from beneath the entire Daystar network and the Lamb family. Grief poured in from every corner. Viewers, colleagues, and fellow ministers all mourning not just a leader.
We turn now to Texas, where controversial Christian television CEO Marcus Lamb has died after his battle with COVID-19. The conservative televangelist making headlines this past year after his network, Daystar, dedicated hours of broadcasts to anti-lockdown and anti-vaccination activists and groups.
But a man whose voice had carried them through uncertainty for decades. As the days passed, the public mourning gave way to quieter, more complicated emotions. People began whispering about the timing of his death and the sudden shifts that followed. At first, these were subtle suspicions, small comments in church hallways, private conversations between friends, murmurs online that something about the sequence of events didn't feel right. It wasn't disrespect or malice. It was just that grief often has a way of uncovering cracks that were always there. Marcus's death was more than a personal tragedy. It marked the beginning of profound changes for the family and the ministry they had built together. Those closest to Marcus noticed the deeper fissures immediately, while the world saw Joni Lamb standing strong and composed on camera, honoring her late husband's memory. Private moments revealed a more complex reality. Tears, whispered fears, and statements like, "Look what you have done to this family," hinted at long-standing tensions now thrown into sharp relief. The grief wasn't just about loss. It exposed underlying pain, unresolved disputes, and emotions that had been simmering quietly for years. Family members struggled to make sense of their own feelings while trying to maintain the public image of unity and faith. Meanwhile, viewers and supporters felt a mix of sorrow and unease. Marcus's death didn't just leave a void in leadership, it left unanswered questions. How would the family move forward? What would happen to Daystar? Some wondered if the tragedy itself had unlocked opportunities or shifts that could only happen in the absence of Marcus's guiding presence. The shock of his death lingered, but so did a creeping sense of uncertainty as whispers of tension, timing.
At the hospital, I was taking care of him, and at around 3 o'clock in the morning, she said to me, she just looked at me in this dark room. I'm there serving, and she looked at me and she said, "Look what you have done to this family." I remember texting my mom saying, "I can't do this anymore. I told God, you feel the pain of my heart. Me and my child are ruining this family." And I said, "I know, my God, you're protective of me. You'll get me out of here." That was my last night. The next day, he dies.
And hidden struggles began to grow louder, quietly reshaping the narrative around a man who had once seemed untouchable. After Marcus Lamb's death, the world expected Joni to grieve quietly, to take the time to process the loss of a husband she had spent over 3 decades with. Marcus had not just been her spouse, he had been her partner in ministry, the co-founder of Daystar Television Network, and someone who shared a vision that touched millions. People imagined her stepping back from the public eye, reflecting on the years they had built together, and letting grief take its natural course. But what happened instead surprised everyone. Joni's life seemed to pivot almost immediately, and the person by her side was Dr. Doug Weiss, a Christian counselor and author known for helping people navigate marriage struggles and sexual addiction recovery. At first glance, their connection seemed natural enough. Doug had a reputation for offering guidance and emotional support, and Joni was a widow navigating the shock of sudden loss. Many assumed their interactions were part of a professional or spiritual support system, yet it didn't take long for those assumptions to crumble. Whispers began to circulate that what was happening between Joni and Doug went far beyond friendship or professional comfort. It was personal, intimate, and moving at a pace that seemed far too quick for anyone still mourning the loss of a life partner. By January 2022, only a couple of months after Marcus's passing, Doug had filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years. The timing immediately raised eyebrows. How could a man who spent decades counseling couples about the importance of commitment and marriage restoration walk away from his own marriage so abruptly? And why was Joni still publicly processing her grief, already seen spending so much time with him?
I went to Daystar one afternoon to grab something from the cafe. There was something in the green room, and I had my child with me, and I knew she was scared at this point, so we didn't take her there anymore. We had a nanny at home with her. But this one time, I wanted to pick up something really quick. I go in there. It's in the afternoon. I didn't think anyone would be in the green room. And I take her with me, and it's horrible. I go to grab that box of food, and in walks Pete and, his spouse. And my child was so full of terror, her body went completely limp, and she fell under the table hard. I grabbed her little body, I picked her up, and I ran into the car. And I remember telling other family members about it, the ones I trusted, and it was traumatic. I was like, I'm not bringing my child here.
To outsiders, the sequence of events felt jarring, unsettling, and almost impossible to reconcile with the public image of a grieving widow. Inside the family, tensions escalated quickly. Joni's children, especially Jonathan and Susie, began to question the speed and nature of their mother's new relationship. To them, it seemed like a betrayal, not just of their late father's memory, but of the stability and integrity of the family and the ministry they had grown up with. Whispers became conversations, conversations became confrontations, and confrontations became public disputes. Every move Joni made, every time she defended her bond with Doug, seemed to deepen the rift. They weren't just arguing about romance, they were arguing about timing, ethics, perception, and loyalty. The public began to notice too. Social media and online forums buzzed with speculation. Critics questioned whether grief and the search for comfort could justify forming a new intimate relationship so soon after loss. Some wondered whether Doug's role as a counselor was truly about supporting Joni's healing, or whether there were other motivations at play. The irony of a marriage counselor leaving his own long-term marriage to enter into a new bond with a widow drew intense scrutiny, and the pace at which their relationship became public added fuel to the fire. Despite the criticism, Joni remained steadfast. She described Doug as a source of strength and a blessing, someone who truly understood her pain and saw her in a way she had not been seen for years. She framed their relationship as a testament to God's ability to bring light from darkness, to create beauty from pain. Yet, for many within the family and the wider Christian community, that explanation did little to ease doubts. Some feared that personal happiness was being prioritized over family stability. Others worried that the ministry they had built with Marcus could be compromised by choices that seemed impulsive or secretive. As the weeks passed, what had started as whispers transformed into public controversy. Joni's children took their concerns public, voicing their fears about both the rapidity of the relationship and the potential impact on the family and Daystar's reputation. Allegations of secrecy, improper timing, and ethical questions circulated widely. Meanwhile, Joni and Doug continued to present themselves as a united front, defending their connection and insisting that it was rooted in faith, prayer, and genuine care. The situation exposed deeper tensions within the family. It wasn't just about romance. It was about trust, perception, and the balance between personal desire and family responsibility. Joni's rapid bond with Doug challenged assumptions about mourning, propriety, and the way public figures are expected to navigate grief. Every public statement, every interaction with Doug became a lightning rod for criticism, turning what should have been a private matter into a spectacle observed and judged by the world. Yet for Joni, the relationship was a lifeline. She had endured unimaginable loss and was navigating responsibilities she had never faced alone before. Doug provided support and companionship during a time when grief could have easily swallowed her. Their relationship, controversial as it was, became a symbol of survival for her, a way to reclaim some joy and agency in a life suddenly disrupted by tragedy. In the end, Joni Lamb's rapid relationship with Doug Weiss wasn't just a personal choice. It was a story of conflict, faith, love, and judgment. It highlighted the tension between private needs and public scrutiny, the challenge of moving on in the shadow of loss, and the complexity of human emotions in the aftermath of tragedy. While some saw betrayal, others saw healing. While critics questioned motives, supporters recognized the need for companionship. And through it all, the world watched, waiting to see whether love, timing, and faith could coexist in a story as complicated as Joni's life had become. After Marcus Lamb passed away, the Lamb family entered a period that none of them could have prepared for. The initial grief was raw and heavy, a combination of personal loss and the sudden responsibility of leading one of the most influential Christian networks in the country. Marcus had not just been a husband and father, he had been the face of Daystar, a man whose voice and presence had inspired millions. His sudden death left a void that was emotional, spiritual, and operational. Everyone expected Joni to take time, to grieve, and to let the family come together in mourning. But as weeks passed, it became clear that the mourning process would not be simple, quiet, or unified. Joni, thrust into the role of both widow and leader, began to make decisions that some family members struggled to understand. Her rapid relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss, a Christian counselor and author, became the focal point of family tension. While Joni framed the relationship as a source of comfort and support, her children, Jonathan and Susie, saw it differently. To them, the timing and closeness of the relationship felt like a betrayal, a disruption of the family unity that had been carefully maintained for decades. They feared that grief was being rushed, that loyalty to Marcus's memory was being sidelined, and that the network's stability was at risk. The disagreements quickly spilled into public view. What had started as quiet conversations and whispered concerns among family members escalated into visible disputes on social media, interviews, and public statements. Jonathan and Susie, feeling unheard behind closed doors, began voicing their disapproval openly, raising questions about the decisions being made within the family and within Daystar's leadership. They argued that personal choices could not be separated from the ministry's integrity, that a widow's new relationship, no matter how comforting, had consequences for the legacy Marcus had built. Behind these public disagreements, the family was struggling to manage deeper and more painful issues. Allegations emerged involving a trusted figure within the ministry and Jonathan and Susie's young daughter, Soitzier. The details were distressing, implicating someone who had long been considered loyal and responsible within the Daystar organization. For Jonathan and Susie, the need to protect their daughter clashed with the family's desire to maintain appearances and protect the network's reputation. They felt betrayed when their concerns were met with resistance, delays, or attempts to handle matters quietly, rather than immediately and transparently. It was a heartbreaking situation, one that forced the family to confront the painful reality that trust and loyalty could be compromised even in a household that had once prided itself on faith and unity. As these issues unfolded, the wider public began to take notice. The Christian community, long supportive of the Lamb family, became divided. Supporters who had admired Joni for her strength in the wake of Marcus's death now questioned her judgment. They asked how a widow could form such a close relationship so quickly, especially with someone whose previous marriage had ended abruptly. Critics argued that her choices were undermining the values she had always preached, and they worried about the message it sent to followers of Daystar. Even as the family's disputes became public, Joni remained resolute. She defended her decisions, insisting that her relationship with Doug was rooted in faith, prayer, and genuine support. She emphasized that Doug had provided the companionship and guidance she needed during an extraordinarily difficult period, and that their bond had nothing to do with betrayal or impropriety. To her, moving forward was not about rejecting Marcus's memory or hurting her children. It was about finding strength and stability in the face of overwhelming grief. Jonathan and Susie, however, were not convinced. They continued to question the ethics, timing, and transparency of decisions being made at both a personal and organizational level. For them, the conflict was about more than personal feelings. It was about protecting their daughter, ensuring that the ministry's integrity remained intact, and holding leadership accountable. They felt forced into a position where private family grievances became matters of public debate, and every social media post or public statement was dissected and analyzed for hidden meaning. The combination of grief, public attention, and conflicting perspectives created an environment of intense pressure. Family interactions that once centered on love, faith, and shared vision were now shadowed by suspicion, anger, and hurt. Conversations that could have resolved issues quietly turned into arguments that were broadcast, amplified, and discussed by outsiders. Every decision Joni made, every defense she issued, became a flashpoint for further criticism and speculation. In this environment, the line between private pain and public scrutiny blurred. Family members struggled to reconcile their love for one another with the intense disagreements that had emerged. They had shared a lifetime of faith, ministry, and mutual support. Yet the tragedy of Marcus's death revealed cracks that had always been there, but had never been so exposed. The disputes were not just about relationships or timing. They were about trust, faithfulness, and the responsibilities that come with leadership in a public ministry. As months passed, the disputes continued to evolve. Joni and Doug's relationship grew stronger in private, even as criticism and doubt persisted in public. Jonathan and Susie's determination to protect their daughter and uphold what they believed to be the integrity of Daystar remained unwavering. In the end, the Lamb family's story became a complex web of grief, loyalty, love, and public pressure. It was a story of how tragedy can expose underlying tensions, how personal choices ripple outward to affect family and community, and how difficult it can be to balance private healing with public responsibility. The family tensions and public disputes surrounding the Lambs were not just a conflict over a relationship or a ministry decision. They were a reflection of the human struggle to navigate grief, loyalty, and faith under the unrelenting eye of public scrutiny. Every step forward seemed to create new questions, and every attempt at reconciliation had to contend with the weight of public perception. In the end, the story of the Lamb family became a cautionary tale about the intersection of private tragedy and public life, a reminder that even the most united families can fracture under pressure when grief, secrecy, and conflicting priorities collide. After the death of Marcus Lamb, the attention on the Lamb family intensified in a way that none of them could have anticipated. Marcus had been more than just a husband and father. He had been the cornerstone of Daystar, the Christian television network that had grown into one of the most influential platforms in faith-based media. His presence commanded respect, and his voice had provided guidance and comfort to millions of viewers. When news broke of his passing from complications related to COVID-19, the immediate reaction was one of shock and grief. Fans, colleagues, and members of the Christian community poured out condolences, remembering him as a man of faith and a leader who had fearlessly spoken his beliefs. The public mourning was vast, sincere, and overwhelming, yet as the days turned into weeks, the initial shock transformed into speculation. People began to notice inconsistencies, or at least patterns that didn't quite make sense in the narrative that had been presented. Marcus's death, sudden and tragic, seemed to coincide with a series of rapid changes in the family's personal lives and in the operation of Daystar. Observers wondered why some decisions were being made so quickly, and why certain relationships were developing at a pace that seemed unusual given the circumstances. Joni Lamb, the widow and co-founder of Daystar, found herself at the center of this scrutiny. Her relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss, a Christian counselor known for working with couples and marriage issues, became the most discussed topic, and the media attention was relentless. Public perception became a double-edged sword for the family. On one hand, viewers and supporters were empathetic to Joni's grief. Many acknowledged that everyone experiences loss differently, and some were eager to see her find comfort and stability. On the other hand, the speed at which she formed a close relationship with Doug, coupled with the timing of his own divorce shortly after Marcus's death, created doubt. Critics questioned whether Joni's choices respected the legacy of her late husband and whether the new dynamics within the family were being guided by faith or personal desire. The whispers that had begun quietly in church hallways and private gatherings quickly turned into headlines, social media debates, and online forums dissecting every public statement, photo, and video. The Christian media landscape, which had previously celebrated the Lambs as paragons of faith and family values, became polarized. Loyal viewers, pastors, and influential religious figures weighed in on what they saw as a moral and spiritual dilemma. Some argued that Joni had every right to pursue happiness, even in the midst of grief, while others saw her actions as a betrayal of Marcus's memory and a potential threat to the credibility of the ministry. The scrutiny wasn't just about a relationship, it was about perception, integrity, and trust. The Lambs had built a network that was more than just entertainment. It was a symbol of faith, hope, and guidance. Every personal decision made by its leaders was now intertwined with the public image of the organization. Media outlets, both secular and Christian-focused, began covering the story extensively. Every revelation, whether confirmed or speculative, was amplified across platforms. Leaked audio recordings, statements from family members, and social media posts were analyzed for hidden meanings. Allegations and rumors, including questions about the nature of Joni and Doug's relationship before Marcus's death, circulated widely. The narrative that had once been private grief now played out on a public stage, with each faction claiming insight into what was true and what was misleading. For Joni and her family, this meant that even intimate moments of mourning, reflection, or family discussion were subject to public interpretation and judgment. The intensity of the scrutiny also raised questions about the legacy Marcus had left behind. Daystar had been a platform dedicated to uplifting messages, spiritual teachings, and community support. Marcus and Joni had spent decades building it, and his sudden absence left both a leadership vacuum and a sensitive transition period. Observers wondered if the network could maintain its integrity amid family disputes, allegations, and public controversies. The tension between private grief and public responsibility was palpable. Every decision about programming, leadership, and messaging was now viewed through a lens of skepticism. Some supporters feared that internal conflicts could erode the credibility that Marcus had painstakingly built. Adding to the pressure was the visible division within the family itself. Joni's children, particularly Jonathan and Susie, openly questioned some of her decisions, further complicating public perception. Their concerns, rooted in both personal feelings and the operational integrity of the network, became part of the larger narrative. For the public, it was no longer simply a story about a widow moving on. It was about a family navigating grief, loyalty, and trust under the microscope of millions of viewers. The disputes highlighted the delicate balance between personal freedom and communal responsibility, a balance that Marcus had always maintained publicly, but which was now being tested behind closed doors. As the months passed, the scrutiny continued to evolve. Every social media post, every interview, every public appearance by Joni or her family members became subject to interpretation. Supporters scrutinized actions for signs of respect to Marcus's memory, while critics searched for evidence of hypocrisy or impropriety. The narrative became a complex web of grief, defense, accusation, and interpretation, leaving many unsure what to believe. It was a story of human emotion intersecting with public expectation, where even sincere expressions of healing or support could be misread or weaponized in public discourse. At the center of it all, Joni Lamb continued to maintain her stance. She spoke publicly about finding strength in her faith and in Doug's support, emphasizing that her actions were guided by prayer and discernment. She highlighted the need to balance personal healing with the responsibilities of leadership, and she appealed to viewers to see her intentions, not just the appearances. Yet for many in the public, intentions were secondary to outcomes.